Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Zafe. I'm here to respond to an analogy from Helen Joyce on the Nature and Nurture podcast. Her analogy depends on some misconceptions about neovaginas, which are surgically constructed in women who were born women but also in trans women, and I thought I could maybe shed some light. My hope is that Ms. Joyce will see this. I might be naive, but I honestly think she might be interested in what's actually true. So I'm hoping that after seeing this, she might reconsider the use of this particular analogy. Here's what she said.
And then lastly, I would say this thing about what if a man can't tell? I'm sorry. If you haven't rooted around to the extent that you can tell the difference between actual female genitals and something that could be made out of the skin of a penis and testicles, then something is badly wrong. These are just very different. The best example I could come up with was if you imagine that somebody was born without a tongue and that you decided you're going to try to make a tongue for them out of some other part of their body, for example, their forearm or their thigh. And you list all the ways in which tongues are just different than the flesh from the forearm or thigh. In particular, your tongue is wet for the whole of your life. And yet it doesn't do what wet skin does, which is to break up, because it's a different sort of skin. It's got muscles right through it. It can curl different ways. It's hypersensitive. It's got a load of nerve endings. It's capable of tasting things. And you're going to put a flap of flesh from somebody's thigh in someone's mouth and then say, see, it pulses. It's like a tongue. You can't tell the difference. No, sorry. You cannot make anything remotely like a woman's vagina that can pass a baby's head through it, that's capable of a certain sort of action in orgasm, that can keep itself clean and moist for an entire lifetime without breaking down. You can't make that out of a man's penis and scrotal skin.
So it's kind of a pejorative analogy. Like, I bet Miss Joyce wouldn't want to apply it to a woman-born woman who happened to have vaginal agenesis. More on that later, though. It's also a misleading analogy. It's based on misconceptions. And the four main misconceptions are that it doesn't pass, it doesn't feel, it doesn't move, and that cellular identity can never change. In the analogy, Helen describes a constructed tongue that doesn't function in any way. However, a neovagina often works exactly as desired. Yes, if you're going to have PIV sex with it, you might need lube, as do many, many women, though surgeons are currently learning about incorporating a source of lubrication from the patient's own body. But the first conception we'll look at is passibility with sex partners. Helen said if you haven't looked or felt closely enough to be able to tell the difference, then something is badly wrong. And this is a normative statement. It's a judgment. We all have a right to judge whoever we want, however we want. But Helen should know that with this statement, she's judging most men. It's my impression that neovaginas are often fully passible during sex. Plenty of born women will tell you that it's possible for a man to lose contact during the act. And, he might just continue what he's doing in between a woman's sweaty legs without knowing the difference. And this is because tactile and erogenous sensation are really different things. So if you look at this admittedly old depiction, it shows where in the brain human tactile sensitivity lies and portrays how much relative sensitivity each body part has with the body size of that part. It's approximate, but it appears that the penis is not the most sensitive tactile organ. While the erogenous reactivity of that area is amazing, the tactile sensitivity, it's just not. Here's another chart making an unfortunate claim for those without foreskins, indicating that penile tactile sensitivity is comparable to the levels in the forearm. So not much, excluding the foreskin. But if you think about it, the foreskin was not designed to distinguish between textures so much as to rub back and forth over one's own anatomy, stimulating oneself to the point of reproduction, while reducing superficial friction and thereby allowing opportunities for deeper pressure in one's partner. And this makes a lot of sense from an evolutionary perspective. If you think back about what traits have been carried forward from evolutionary times till now, the ability for a penis to be discriminating about vagina texture is not a trait that was probably selected for at all. We know men are often discriminating about the appearance of their partner. I think they're trying to create offspring that are worth investing in. But it appears to me that there was very little to be gained genetically and much, much to be lost from having the tendency or even the ability to discriminate and be choosy about the internal texture of one's partner. Once the partner has decided to get involved and the process has begun, it was best to finish the job, evolutionarily speaking. Nowadays, now that most people have easy access to Ziploc bags, cooking oil, and a couch, there are surely some men who have lost their entire evolutionary shot due to being indiscriminating about texture. But mankind did not evolve in times of such luxury. Also, internal texture is not an obsession on men's forums like you think it might be, but it's not. Not like penis size or jaw shape or women's breasts even. It barely has a presence. The truth is, I've heard of one man once who put it into a trans woman and was like, something is not right. But this is absolutely not a typical experience. So as far as passibility, this leaves manual and visual inspection. Neovaginas and vulvas can frequently be visually indistinguishable from their born counterparts. So yes, short of an up-close inspection using one's hands, neovaginas typically pass during sex and most associated activities. The next misconception is about sensitivity. Helen implied in her analogy a lack of sensitivity. And if we're talking about the surface tissue on the inside of the space, anyone who has one knows that tactile sensitivity, depending on where you are, can be very questionable. This is probably a good thing given that vaginas are often asked to pass entire humans through them. The sensitivity also varies depending on the woman. This is similar in neovaginas, depending on the person, the procedure, the outcome, and the location. Sensitivity can vary. However, when it comes to deeper tissues, almost everybody has erogenous sensitivity, deep inside, that can lead to satisfying engagements. The third misconception is that Helen implied that a neovagina would be immobile, like a dead flap of skin inside of a tongue, and this also just isn't true. Everybody has a pelvic floor, which is like a complex cushion of muscles, a hammock, and it can ball up and really, it's quite mobile and active. And when this muscle group tightens up, in male or female type pelvises, any openings that go through it will be squeezed. This is something that happens naturally during climax for every person who has a pelvic floor, rhythmic kegling. A present-day neovagina does not have the exact muscles and the exact same layout as a natal vagina, but unlike the constructed tongue, it does the job it's there for, generally to both parties' mutual satisfaction. The fourth misconception is about cellular identity. Neovaginas have been shown to undergo mucosalization, which is where the tissue type changes from epidermis to more like a mucous membrane, which is what natal vaginas are mostly made of. This has been shown to happen in surgically constructed vaginas. I don't believe it's been demonstrated in transgender women at this time. But Helen seems to speak about human tissue as if it were, once it's something, it can never possibly change. Like every cell of my nose is in essence a nose cell and couldn't possibly be ever anything different. Helen might say that the identity of these cells is immutable. But how does it know that it's a nose cell? How do my tongue cells know that they're tongue cells? There might be some additional cell lineage effects maybe, but mostly it's epigenetics, which is when some genes are turned off and some on. Chemical messages and environmental factors around the cell help maintain the cell's identity. It's epigenetic identity, so that it knows this is a nose cell, that's a butt cell. And when these factors in the chemical and ambient environment change, it's been shown that epigenetic features of a cell or cell line can change in response. So that, like in response to altered chemical or environmental stimulus, methylation and histone acetylation can over time be undone, and the cell can take on a modified identity. Medical complications can happen, but the idea that all neovaginas are non-functional, that none are healthy, and none do exactly what they're supposed to do, it's just not true. And so for all these reasons, the analogy that a neovagina is like a very poorly reconstructed tongue, it's based on inaccuracies. And it's gross. I mean, anyone who hasn't experienced a friend or loved one with an extremely low functioning tongue is liable to find this analogy very off-putting. I mean, that's probably part of the goal of this analogy. A more accurate analogy would be to suppose a surgeon constructed a tongue that could be used to speak and it articulated well, and suppose it moved and looked like quite normally. But suppose it didn't have the coordination to eat and it couldn't taste. This would be a surgery worth doing. It would be a medical marvel. And I think people would find it a whole lot less gross than an inanimate tongue, even if it wasn't at 100% function. However, of course, this is part of the message Ms. Joyce appears to be trying to convey, that a neovagina in a male-born person is wrong and disgusting. It's clear that the idea feels very threatening to her, and I can't fault her for her feelings. Everyone has a right to their feelings. It appears to me that perhaps her biggest fear related to male-born people with vaginas is about a threat of sexual assault in women's only spaces. From some perspectives, namely the evolutionary one, this actually makes just a hell of a lot of sense. During the time humans were evolving, women who could intuitively categorize people as male and female, and who did so automatically, and who had a visceral fear or hatred of unwanted sexual interest from strange men, these women were less likely to die from an unsupported pregnancy and child rearing. It's super sad to think about that, but our past is not always pretty. These women were more likely to pass on their genes to successful offspring, and those offspring were our ancestors. So of course it's natural for women today to find the perception of unwanted male sexuality to feel very threatening. They literally inherited those feelings. So, I got an aside. Women, have you ever felt some strange man's arm like jostling against you in public transportation? And just felt like a horrible feeling? Like it'd make you feel angry, or like it actually physically could cause pain? All over it, even. I'm pretty sure this is where that feeling comes from. Back when we were evolving, if a strange man was that up in your space, you were in danger. And so women have a strong repulsion for this feeling. It even causes pain. Interestingly, that man is at least 90% of the time fully oblivious, because men do not get a comparable feeling, so far as I can tell. Anyways, a person with a vagina is not a threat for causing unwanted pregnancy. In some ways, this fear is vestigial in this case, but from the perspective of human evolutionary development, the fearful or disgusted feelings, even a hypersensitive amount of them, makes a lot of sense. There's another set of feelings that makes a lot of sense from an evolutionary perspective that I've had. As a child, I was really creeped out by people with facial differences and intellectual disabilities. To be honest, I was terrified, and I'm sure I wasn't friendly or kind to my peers who had these differences. I don't think I was mean, but I was certainly one of 400 kids who was not nice, and the effect adds up. And I really regret this. I wish an adult had taken me aside and taught me that their condition was not contagious. It wasn't due to an environmental factor that I would be exposed to if I hung out with them, and that they were just kids like me inside. I could have worked through my fear, become a better friend or peer to them, but it didn't happen. Kids are just total dicks. if you don't help them figure out how to do better, unfortunately. So anyway, reflecting on this, I think there is very often great value in questioning the feelings we've been given by our evolutionary history, even though they make sense in the context of our history. Questioning rather than doing the most typical human thing and simply using our big brains to justify whatever feelings we've been bequeathed, or allowing ourselves to be influenced by these feelings without our awareness or knowledge. Of course, when it comes to fear of unwanted sexuality, safety is a real and important consideration, and pregnancy is not the only concern. I don't have all the answers for safety, but I know I don't want to live in some kind of like Minority Report future where classes of people lose rights based on theoretically elevated risks. Like, should we ban all female sex offenders from female bathrooms? Because they're surely more likely to offend than non-offenders, like reoffend, right? Lesbians probably sex offend against women more often than heterosexual women do, I'm guessing. So I know I don't have all the safety answers, but these are things to think about. Anyways, I'm not here to talk about bathroom laws. Maybe that'll be for another time. I'm here to talk about revulsion for other people's bodies. Should we be encouraging this in others? Is it justified by our feelings, even if it's not justified by the nature of the body parts? I've got one last thing to add. People have taken the extracellular tissue from a donor penis, the extracellular matrix, like the scaffolding that remains when the living cells are removed, and seeded them with stem cells from a patient who's lacking a penis. The stem cells grow and differentiate according to the local environment and the signals around them, and the result was a functional penis made of the patient's own cells. These penises have been surgically implanted and were eventually able to impregnate another rabbit. Yes, it was done in rabbits. But this technology is coming. They're mostly working on it for the sake of the men who have lost their penises in battlefields. But what happens when this technology comes for vaginas? When a person has a vagina made out of vagina material that functions perfectly and is made out of their own cells, will it still be gross? At that point, the analogy with an inanimate, insensate tongue will not just be ill-founded, but nonsensical. Yet I can't help but assume that Helen will still have a problem with it, since it'll be part of a person who was born male. Free speech isn't dead. Nobody's going to jail for calling another person or group of people's bodies gross. But I wonder, is this a situation where it's best to follow and justify the feelings given to us by evolution? Regardless of the state of surgical technology, like yesterday, today, or tomorrow, is it ever a good thing to work to promote disgust between peoples? I don't know. All right, thank you for listening. If you'd like more people to see a scientifically founded message about how transitioning to change sex is real and not delusion, then leave a comment, consider subscribing. Much more is to come. Thank you.